What's up, everyone? I hope you are doing well today. This is Raphael Garcia here with Schwan Humes for episode 155 of the MMA Ratings podcast. We have myself back with my partner Schwan. First and foremost, as always, like we do every week, Schwan, why don't you let everybody know how you're doing?
Oh, I'm good. Not busy as always, just run around trying to help as many people as I can. And then I start a new job next Monday. So leaving one job Friday, going right over to my new job Monday.
What's the new gig, man?
I'm just gonna be working for it. It's an office supply company. It's kind of got better hours. They actually have a 401k, vacation time. My other company wasn't a bad company. I actually really liked working there, but we had an office staff of two, which meant nobody could get sick, nobody could have any time off, and nobody could come in late, and nobody could leave early just because of the nature of the work we were doing. So be a little bit of a change. It'll still be a small office, but more people and kind of. I guess my responsibilities will fit a little bit more, and it'll give me a little bit more leeway as far as my time, which is, time is pretty invaluable. You can't get enough of it. So hopefully it'll be a good change.
Good, good. How are the girls?
Good. Two of them just got back from AAU basketball practice. One of them had a track practice before, and then went straight to summer ball practice. Oh yeah, last week my daughter won first in shot put and third in discus. So she's pretty good at the track throwing event.
Good stuff, good stuff. You're still breaking up a little bit. You sound a little better now, so let's leave it. Whatever you're doing right now, let's leave it how we got it.
Gotcha.
All right, so we have a lot to talk about today. Our two main topics are going to be fallout from UFC 248 and looking forward to UFC Brasilia, which is this weekend. Pretty big, some important fights there. So I'm looking forward to covering that because there's a bunch of guys that I'm interested in on that card. But before we do that, as always, let's jump into telling everybody where to find us. So as always, you can catch all of our content over at MMAratings.net, where Adam Martin is covering most of the written content, Schwan and myself handling the podcast content there. And you can always go and rate the fights. Let us know how excited you are for upcoming fights and what you thought of the action that just passed. So go up there if you watch UFC 248, rate all the fights and let us know what you thought about the action from this past Saturday and tell us how excited you are for the fights coming up this weekend. You can catch us on Instagram and Twitter at MMAratings.net and on all podcast platforms such as Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple iTunes, and on YouTube as well at MMA Ratings. We have this show every Tuesday and our professional wrestling podcast once a week, depending on what big shows are on. So, Schwan, let's go ahead and jump into UFC 248. And we got to start with the main event where Israel Adesanya defeated Yoel Romero via decision. Schwan, you're a little bit too much movement. Yeah, so where Israel Adesanya defeated Yoel Romero via decision in what is widely being considered a less than stellar fight. It was very slow paced, multiple rounds where there were very few strikes thrown. And the main talking point out of this is who's to blame? You had two guys in the cage at once, two guys going in there expected to fight, two guys who've been saying a whole lot coming into this fight, and two guys that have kind of had a track record of some very exciting, high damage, high volume fights. If that's the case, and you look at what happened this past Saturday, who do you believe is to blame? Do you have Adesanya or Romero to take most of the blame here?
Well, the hard thing is
before you start answering, can you straighten out your mic situation first? You there? And now he's completely dropped. Schwan?
Hello? I can hear you.
There you go. Now I can hear you. Go ahead and answer the question. Who's to blame for the main event of UFC 248?
Well, the real person to blame for this is the UFC matchmakers, if we're being honest. Everybody expected this fight to be super explosive, super violent, but the fact of the matter is, and we discussed this last week, we mentioned this, these guys are counter fighters. Yoel Romero fights in spots with big moments of offense. Flying knees, big right hands, leg, body kicks, whatever it is. He doesn't fight a continuous hard 5 rounds. He kind of navigates, controls distance, defends, figures out what you're doing, sets a trap, and springs it on you. Israel Adesanya is a little busier. He does things to draw out attacks, but then he counters it. He's not a guy who initiates exchanges. He's not a guy who just throws volume. He's not a guy who walks you down unless he's drawing out attacks where he feels comfortable countering you, impressing you. So when I mentioned this fight, I said this is going to look a lot more like Adesanya versus Silva than Adesanya versus Gastelum or Weidman versus Romero or Luke Rockhold versus Romero. In those fights, you had guys who were providing clear opportunities for them to do the things they wanted to do. In the case of Gastelum, he forced Adesanya to have to fight because he wasn't going to take no for an answer. He didn't have the skills or the control to sit back and wait. So he forced Adesanya to get into firefight. Robert Whittaker forced him to be more savage and offensive. In the case of Weidman and Rockhold, they followed the typical plan of Romero. They attacked, had some success early. Romero started kidding their timing, figuring them out. Then he lowered the boom on them. But in either case, the limitations of those fighters allowed each guy to exploit them with their style, which is a counter-based style. So you had two counter fighters in a fight with each other, and the only thing that was going to generate action was if somebody took the lead, and neither one of these guys is known for taking the lead. So I blame the matchmakers, first of all, because this is a fight I predicted the way it was going to be weeks and months before. And secondly, if I had to really put it on somebody, I guess you have to put it on Romero, because he's the guy who doesn't have the belt. He's the one who's on his third or fourth title shot, who's close to being put as a gatekeeper. He needs to make the most of his opportunity. I'm not saying fight stupid, because that doesn't fix anything either. But he's the guy who doesn't have the belt. Adesanya has leverage. As long as he keeps the belt, he gets another chance to showcase himself. He gets another time as a champion. And if he puts on an exciting fight, all this goes away. Romero, having missed weight in other fights, and also lost in his two biggest fights, he's really not in a position where he can afford to give away a title shot by not making some kind of surge to win the title. So if you look at it from that point of view, it falls on Romero. The only other argument you can make is that Adesanya is the champion. He's the hottest guy out there. He talked a lot of stuff, and he didn't back any of it up. But in the order I give it, UFC matchmaking, Yoel Romero, then Israel Adesanya. All of them played a part in it, but the matchmaking, this was never going to be the kind of fight people expected it to be. I don't understand why people are shocked. This is exactly what I said was going to happen. A slow-paced fight, because you have a guy. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, so let's talk about a couple of different things there, because you mentioned that this is the type of fight that anyone thought it would be. So first and foremost, from a stylistic standpoint, Adesanya made it clear that he was going to go out there and do one thing and put Yoel in a situation where he needed to start countering or where he needed to be more aggressive, but he did not. The fact that Romero didn't change his aggressiveness, didn't change his strategy at all in the situation where you're right, he's on his fourth title fight, and if he didn't win this, he's probably not going to get another one. The fact that he didn't push the pace and push the onus is a little more of the blame. Should it fall on him for that matter?
As far as his own career, yeah, the blame it falls on him, because these opportunities are few and far between, and while he didn't waste the other two, he's seemingly wasted this one by not making it a point to push the issue. So from that aspect, it is on him because of the nature of title shots in his career. The only reason I go slightly against that is because his game plan, his job isn't to make fights exciting. I tell this because I work with fighters, you work with fighters, we've had this conversation before. It's not your job to make the fight exciting. It's your job to do what it takes to unbalance your opponent, limit his chances to damage you, and give you the best opportunity to win. The approach Yoel Romero was doing gave him the best opportunity to win. Essentially, all he had to do was land 2 or 3 big strikes around, and he would have won the fight. Israel won the fight because he had the steady leg kicks. So there was something consistent that showed up in every single round that the judges could hang their hat on. If Yoel Romero lands a big hook, a big knee, a big takedown, 1 or 2 every round, he wins the fight because he minimized Israel's ability to get his offense off. Even though Israel won, nobody thought that was an impressive win. The best striker in MMA, as some people call him, didn't look like the best striker. He couldn't initiate anything. So Yoel Romero was playing a game that put him in a position to win, but he didn't show the sense of urgency in those few spots that would have gotten him the win. He didn't have those moments of explosiveness. Kind of like a reverse Tyron Woodley. Tyron will sit moments not do anything, but he makes sure that he has those big moments. At no point did Romero really have big standout moments that could truly separate him.
What did you think about his strategy overall to not push Adesanya and not get into those heavy exchanges where he could get countered and picked apart? Do you think that was a sound strategy, or looking back, would you have done something different?
I think it was a good strategy because the simple fact of the matter is, and this was shown with when he fought Anderson. If you're fairly durable, you've got some self-control and discipline, and you can navigate or manipulate distance and timing a little bit, Israel's going to have a hard time finding you. Israel wants guys who are going to come at him. He wants guys who are going to back straight up or guys who are going to come straight in. He doesn't want to have to go looking for a guy. And every time he's attempted to go looking for a guy, he's paid a price. He tried it against Silva. Silva landed some counters, some good shots with the hand. When he tried it against Romero just missed on a couple of glancing big hooks, some glancing kicks. He didn't land the way he wanted to, but he was able to land well enough to scare Israel off. So from a strategic point of view, he did what was right. He minimized the opportunities Israel had to get his offense off. I mean, the only other fight that Israel looked worse in offensively and to a sense defensively was against Anderson Silva. He was missing strikes. He didn't know how to get his entries set up. And when he fought Silva, the same thing happened. The only difference is Silva actually made an attempt to do some work, and Romero just kept waiting.
So let's talk about the Adesanya aspect of this. His strategy basically worked because he got the decision victory there. Do you think so? The main conversation point coming out of this fight is whether or not his stock dropped, and we have a listener question in reference to that later on today too, as well, that I really want to get into. But before we do that, just answer the question in a yes or no stance, and maybe give us a couple of lines on why. Do you believe his stock dropped after this fight? Why or why not?
Yes. Adesanya, yes. It dropped tremendously. He's still the champion. They can't take that away from him. Dana White's still trying to cover his ass a little bit by saying that it was on Romero. But the fact of the matter is, he's made himself out to be a destroyer. He's made himself out to be light years ahead of everybody. And the fact of the matter is, a guy not willingly engaging him essentially shut him down as far as his efficiency, his accuracy, and his aggression. When have you ever seen him that hesitant? When have you ever seen him that inaccurate? When have you ever seen him that gun shy to commit to anything? It's never really happened. Even against Anderson, he was more willing to fire off. So the idea that he's this unstoppable force and you can't do anything against him has essentially gone away, because Romero is nobody's world-class technical striker. All he did was approach the problem from a strategically sound point of view, and essentially he shut Israel Adesanya down. You take away the leg kicks, what did Adesanya do?
I mean, even if you take those away, he did enough to win the fight. But let me ask you the same question in this stance as well, too. If you look at Romero's last few fights, especially his victories, he beats people up in a way that they're never the same. Robert Whittaker, Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, Jacare Sosa, Lyoto Machida. He retired Tim Kennedy, Brad Tavares. I mean, even Derek Brunson. You look down the list, and people that try to stand and bang with him usually get, not only do they get hurt, but they have career-altering results out on the back end. The fact that Adesanya came out unscathed with a win, does that count more, or does that mean more than his stock dropping?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, it shows something, but I guess it kind of shows something. I think Romero was also wary of Adesanya's counterpunching. But the thing about it is, people who watch Romero fight, the biggest thing is, it's the same thing as Adesanya. It's just at a lesser stage. He takes whatever you have, and then he finds these big spots of offense. Adesanya draws stuff out of you, and then he takes away from you immediately. Yoel Romero lets you get some momentum. Yoel Romero lets you find your rhythm. Yoel Romero lets you lose your tools, and then he picks his spot to take that away and land something big. Since Adesanya was never consistently dominating or using his full array of weapons, he never had the opportunity to really expose himself. He wasn't going to expose himself. He knows how dangerous Romero is. He knows how powerful he is. So he was never going to expose himself. He was never going to put himself in any position where he was going to be severely countered by Romero. Once he realized what Romero was doing, he wasn't going to open himself up to it. One, he doesn't know how to initiate offense. Two, he was not taking any chances. Yoel Romero, even at his age, is still a world-class athlete with world-class power. He was not going to serve himself up. He wasn't going to take any chances. So the only way the fight was going to happen is if Yoel Romero, the challenger, took these chances. So in an instance, he played it smart, but I've already known Adesanya is smart. I already know Adesanya's got poise and maturity. That's how he got to the point he is now. The thing is, he's made himself out to be a destroyer. I just get the job done. I just finish these guys. I just punish these guys. And in this fight, against the toughest opponent he's faced, some would say Whitaker's a little bit tougher, but some would say that Romero is. He didn't look spectacular. He didn't look dangerous. He didn't look brave. He didn't look exciting. He looked a little skittish, and he took more of a controlled, safety first approach to the fight. And that hurts from the guy he's told us he is. He didn't tell us he was safety first. He came out as a destroyer, and he was not that against a guy who was fully capable of doing the same to him.
So let's talk about one more aspect of this before we move on to the co-main event. And I want to compare what you saw on Saturday to what we are thinking Paulo Costa will bring to the table. He is definitely more aggressive. We saw his fight against Yoel Romero where they were just slugging it out for 15 minutes. Do you think that plays into his advantage? Does he have confidence after watching this fight against against Adesanya, or will his aggression lead him down the wrong path, quite like it did Robert Whitaker when he fought Adesanya and got knocked out in the second round?
Well, the thing about it is, Paulo Costa's whole thing is he feels he has the physicality and the athleticism and the power and the durability necessary to fight in a similar fashion to what Kelvin Gastelum did. I'm going to just force you to fire back. And I believe that I can take whatever you have longer than you can take whatever I have. Because the more volume you use, the more you sit down on your strikes, the more open you become to being countered. The most dangerous time to get countered is when you're striking. Adesanya is not going to be able to just dance and stay away from Costa because Costa's going to put that much pressure on him. He's going to force him to exchanges, and he feels, even though Adesanya is landing on me, I can take his shots. I believe he can't take mine. So his confidence isn't going to be given anything by this fight because this fight isn't the nature of fight he has. Costa doesn't have that kind of poise. He's not going to sit back. He's not going to take any chances in how he's approaching the fight. He might fight more deliberate pressure, but his whole goal is to fight with pressure and force exchanges. Romero was essentially trying to sit back, get Adesanya to show his hand so that he could explode with something big. Costa's going to be volume. He's going to be in his face. I don't necessarily know that he has the skills to stay at range and pop a jab and work long distance tools and work his way into spots to attack. So this fight couldn't have given him any confidence except he saw fear in Adesanya's eyes. And he thinks that Adesanya can't handle power because if Adesanya really could handle the power, he would have pressed the issue with Romero and engaged in exchanges. So strategically, this does nothing for his confidence. But as far as Adesanya's unwillingness to really get down and dirty and exchange and muck it up, he's thinking this guy can't take it. This guy's physically fragile. And if I put enough pressure on him and I put this power on him, he will break. So from that regard, he has confidence. But as far as what he saw last night from a technical manner, that's not his style, nor is it his mentality. So that showed him nothing. It's no blueprint he can follow or no blueprint that he would follow.
So how do you think that fight plays out?
I'm very concerned about Israel's durability. I really don't think he's nearly as durable as a lot of people assume because you're a striker, you instantly can handle punishment. I don't think that's the case. I think against a really big hitter, Israel Adesanya can't. I mean, he got hurt against Gastelum. He got stung a little bit by Anderson Silva, and I believe Costa is fully capable of knocking him out. I don't know that he has the poise and the discipline or the cardio to really go while he's constantly getting countered and raked to the body and punished. But I do believe he does have the physicality and the athleticism to put Adesanya away if he can get him into the spots he wants to.
Good thoughts there, sir. Good thoughts. Let's move on to the co-main event where we saw probably one of the best fights in recent memory, where Weili Zhang took a split decision victory over Joanna Jedrzejczyk. This is a fight where a lot of people are saying that, well, not a lot of people. There's a lot of voices claiming that Joanna won. From a scoring perspective, who did you have winning, Zhang or Jedrzejczyk?
Just from that point, I actually I went with Zhang. I thought Weili's power was really the difference. Sure thing. In women's mixed martial arts, a lot of girls don't hit for power. They throw a lot of volume, but they don't really mark each other up. They don't really move each other back like noticeably. So when a judge sees someone land with power, like really see someone head snap back, it makes an impression on them. When you see someone swelling excessively, it makes an impression on you. Joanna was probably more accurate, probably threw a little bit more volume, but it took her 5 shots to have the same effect that it took Weili to have with 1 or 2. And I think that was the difference. They scored her shots a little bit more heavily because they thought she was doing more damage.
Do you think with how close this fight was, it warrants an immediate rematch?
It could. My concern for Joanna, for Miss Jedrzejczyk, I can't say her names, Jedrzejczyk
just call her by her first name.
Is the fact of the matter is she's been through a lot of really exhausting fights. Her first fight with Claudia Gadelha was very tough. The second fight, it wasn't a lot of punishment, but it was very high activity, very high contact. The fight with Valerie Letourneau was a back and forth kind of brawl. Even the fight with Karolina Kovacevic, even though it was one-sided, she had to fight at a very high pace. She put out a lot of volume, and that affects you too. Even when you're winning, that's a lot of stress and pain on your joints. Same thing with Andrade. That's another long 5-round active fight. So she's been in all these fights with a lot of volume, taking a lot of punishment, fighting at a very high pace. Then you put in the Rose fight, the second fight, that's another 5-round fight. Then you put in the first fight, Rose, she got wiped off the mat with that counter shot. It's been a lot of mileage and a lot of shots taken and a lot of punishment and a lot of stress on her cardio and her physicality. I don't know that walking right back into another punishing fight is the best thing for her. Now, Weili isn't the puncher that Andrade made her out to be, but the fact is she is heavy-handed. She is looking to put maximum power on her shots, and Joanna's defense, while it's improved slightly, still ain't great. I don't know that I honestly, what I said on Twitter afterwards is I expect to see a steep decline in Joanna after this. I think she's later in her career. She's been fighting in these long 5-round fights for the past 3, 4, 5 years. And I feel that at this stage, she's right on that peak. This might be her last great performance. In the next fight or two, I expect to see a decline. And she's not the greatest athlete in the first place. A lot of her success is her length and her physicality and her size. I do expect to see a drop-off in the next fight. And if she fights Weili again, I really think that Weili might get her out of there earlier. Inside of 3 rounds.
So she's been in the UFC since 2014. And in that time span, 11 of her fights have gone to distance, either being 3 rounds or 5. If you look at the 5-round fights, 9 of those fights have gone the distance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Excuse me. 8 of her 11 fights have gone the distance in the UFC have gone 5 rounds. And that is a lot of damage.
It's a lot of damage. And we had this discussion before. I was talking about a boxer, Antonio Margarito. He was a guy known as the Tijuana Tornado. And his thing was his volume, how he could take punishment, how he could keep throwing volume, how he would physically break guys. And same thing with Cain Velasquez. When you have that style, not only is it punishing in fights, for you to get into the shape and the mentality necessary to fight that way demands that you push yourself very hard in training beyond normal methods, beyond normal limits. So you're burning it at both ends. You're killing yourself in the training so you can fight with the pace and the courage and the accuracy and the stamina in the fight. So not only is she going through these huge 5-round wars, even if they're one-sided, she's throwing all this volume and she's still taking shots. She has to do that in her training so that she can perform in the fights in a manner. You can't just show up on fight night and throw that much volume if you hadn't been doing it all fight camp in the majority of your life. So her career is going to burn bright, but I feel it's going to be a little bit shortened because she's burning the candle at both ends. And I really do not believe that she's capable of fighting another fight like this. And I feel the next one she gets into, or the next time she faces a big puncher, there's a good chance it doesn't go 5 rounds. I still don't think her chin's the greatest. I think the reason this went 5 rounds isn't because her chin's gotten better. Weili's not the puncher she's made out to be. And secondly, when Weili gets in extended exchanges, instead of snapping with her shots, she starts cuffing you with them and she starts clubbing you with them. After the first 2 shots, they get kind of wide, they get kind of pushy. So they're not landing with the same snap. If she could throw from shot 1 to shot 5 with the same snap, Joanna doesn't make it out of in the 5-round decision. But Weili can't do that. And she doesn't have a consistent left hook, which is kryptonite for Joanna. So she's lacking the tools, she's lacking the technique, and then just from the actual distance, she's not good at managing distance. So if she's throwing from a distance, she's lunging, she's reaching, she's walking into jabs and front kicks and straight right hands, which kind of take the sting off her shots because her shots are getting interrupted. Instead of delivering a smooth punch, she's getting jolted a little bit, which takes the heat off her shot, which allows Joanna to roll with it, get away from it, or even if it hits her, it doesn't carry that same power. So there's technical and strategical reasons why Weili couldn't get the job done. But I don't think it had anything to do with Joanna's chin. I think her chin's still suspect, and I think if somebody bites down and can really fire off in exchange, like really fire off, they can get her out of there. I still believe that. I didn't see anything from the fight that tells me different. And the fact that Joanna is actually paying attention to defense a little bit on the inside tells me she knows her chin ain't there. She never used to pay attention. She just throw volume. Now she's trying to defend, tie up, trying to roll a little bit because she knows she can't take those kind of shots. Not continuously, not even singularly. Rose Namajunas hits her clean again, she's out of there. Andrade lands clean on her, she's out of there.
So Brian Campbell over at I can't think of the name of the show that he does with Luke Thomas now. I can't think of the name of the show, but on Monday they were talking about these two women fighting, and he recommended that Joanna should retire. Is that too drastic? Should we be talking about her stepping away, or has she taken so much damage over these last 6 years that maybe we're at a point where she should call it a career?
Well, the question becomes, how much money can she make? Is she really going to get a life-altering payday? 2, her fight style. 3, her training style. We just discussed that. She's burning it at both ends just to maintain it, just to stay at that point. As you get older, that gets even harder to do. And I don't necessarily know that she's got the time or the mentality to develop the defense that's going to give her the leeway she needs to navigate it. Against a lot of these girls, she's just outclasses them. But as far as being elite and challenging for a title, I mean, I don't know that she can beat Rose still. She hasn't been able to beat Rose in two fights. She hasn't beat Weili in one. There's really only, 2 or 3 girls she could fight that would actually put her back in a title fight. And if she loses another title fight, that'll be 4 title fights she's lost. So now she's in a position where they can't keep pushing her because all she does is knock off potential contenders. And lastly, even if she wants to move up a weight class, she's already tried that. She lost to Valentina decisively. So she can't move a weight class to challenge for a belt. She's already lost 3 title fights at her own weight, and she's taken a huge amount of punishment. I mean, there's not a lot of lucrative alternatives for her as far as making money and big name impression-making fights. If you can think of any, please tell me.
No, I definitely agree. I think that it'll be interesting to see what's next for her because she can still probably put away up and coming fighters who are green and still
that doesn't help the division though.
Big win, but it doesn't. Like I wrote a piece about who she should fight next, and a recommendation I made was like someone like Angela Hill. Angela Hill's surging. She is on a 5-2 run, and she's fought 7 times in the last year, six or 7 times in the last year, something ridiculous like that. So that will be a real kind of measuring stick, to say where is Joanna at this point in her career.
It'd be great for Angela. Angela wins that fight, she probably gets a title shot, or she's right next to one.
Yeah, especially with that run that she's been on lately.
If Joanna wins it, that's not going to be enough to get her another title fight if she takes a fight in between. If she loses it, and no offense against Angela. Angela's a very good fighter, but if she loses it, people are going to, her image takes a hit and her value takes a hit because that's the kind of girl, in theory, she used to walk through. And now she's going through if she goes through a decision with Angela Hill, that makes it look suspect because she's known as a dominator, a girl who only gets extended by the elite, a girl who only loses to the elite. Even though Angela's put on a great run, people still have her in a certain category mentally. Not saying it's true, but image matters. And if she struggles with Angela, that's a bad look for her. If she loses to Angela, she's gonna drop 3, 4, 5 spots. And so it's a dangerous fight for her. And I don't know that she's willing to risk her ranking and potential paydays to give Angela Hill the rub, as we call it in pro wrestling.
And another thing I wanted to point out there too as well is Joanna's kind of in that position where Frankie Edgar has been for a long part of his career, since losing the lightweight title and since he's dropped so many fights to Jose Aldo, where they're good enough to defeat the up-and-comers, but still not good enough to get back to the title. And we see how that's kind of been a detriment to him throughout his career and where he is kind of now. Like he's at that point now where he's not going to get back to the belt anytime soon. I don't think he's ever going to get back to the title, in my opinion. And he's becoming a stepping stone for fighters like Brian Ortega or the Korean Zombie.
Yeah, I mean that's what's basically happened. But she didn't have the option that she can't drop a weight class. She's too big. She can't move up unless she's going to start all the way from scratch. And while she could probably work her way up to a title fight, she was soundly defeated by the champion. It's just I'm not saying she has to retire. I'm just saying I don't know in the UFC what there is for her as far as big money fights, big money opportunities, and realistic chances at getting that title belt.
So one last question about this fight here. Yeah. Where does it rank within your like all-time fights?
I'd probably say it's maybe top 5. I haven't some of the fights since I haven't seen them in a while. You get the recency bias. So I'd probably say definitely a top 5 just because of the sustained intensity. It wasn't moments of explosiveness. It wasn't moments of excitement. It was pretty much from round 1 to round 5, constant exchanges, constant initiation of exchanges, and both people were both elite, close enough to elite to make it exciting and technical, but also flawed enough that the fight could go the full 5 rounds. Nobody could afford to take their foot off the gas because each fighter was limited either technically or strategically enough or physically to where they were forced to fight at that pace. Otherwise, the other person would overwhelm them. So the maintained intensity and the back and forth nature of the fight is what separated from most. There was no point where you really felt anybody took over a round. Somebody might have won a round, but at no point did they ever take it over. And pretty much every round could have went either way. Like literally, we always say that, but literally every round could have went either way. And one more thing before we move on to this. All those calls for Weili to move up and face Valentina Shevchenko, I hope we put an end to that. The fighter I saw on Saturday night gets wiped off the map by Valentina. Let's keep it straight. She couldn't avoid a punch to save her life, and her power, while impressive, if Amanda Nunes isn't moving you back and Amanda Nunes isn't knocking you out, I'm not going to say Weili can't knock her out, but it's going to be a hard step to convince me that she knocks Valentina out or she physically bullies Valentina. And a lot of Weili's success is physicality, pressure, and power. She ain't bullying Valentina, and she damn sure ain't knocking her out. But Valentina lands a clean counter on her, counter kick to the body, counter kick to the head. That's pretty much going to be all it is. So we need to hold off on that fight until Weili kind of rounds out her game a little bit more, or pretty much just rounds out her game a little bit more. Right now, fighting Valentina is pretty much asking to lose your title and lose any chance you have of being a pound-for-pound fighter in the division.
It's funny because Valentina, she was actually on Ariel Helwani's show yesterday, and she was talking on TMZ as well, where she was saying that she doesn't think Weili Zhang is prepared to face the upper echelon of fighters, and now that she almost made it seem like Joanna was her first taste of a upper echelon fighter, and I don't necessarily agree with that because Weili
people in Joanna's camp think the same. People in ATT believe this. I know for a fact they believe that maybe she was a little spoon-fed, she was a little guided into a position and given a favorable matchup in Andrade.
But I mean, and what's interesting is Weili's run to the title has much more name value than Valentina's run as a champion. Weili's been defeating better names in these last 4 fights than Joanna. Oh, excuse me. Weili Zhang has been fighting better names than Valentina has faced in their last 4 fights. I mean, name for name, Valentina has no space since she's moved to 125. She hasn't fought anybody of the same caliber that Weili has fought at 115.
Oh no, I would agree with that, but I would still say by far Valentina is probably the better athlete.
Yeah,
I think she's the younger fighter, and I'm still gonna say she's better. I understand exactly what you're saying, and on paper that's 100% correct. But if we look at everything in a vacuum, as far as the skill sets, the physicality, and the tools, and the one opponent they have shared, she went life or death with Joanna, and Joanna pretty much just got grown woman by Valentina. It's just a bad matchup. Your physicality, your pressure, facing a world-class counterpuncher who is not just super sharp with her shot, but at this weight class has world-class power. That's not a good matchup. It's just stylistically. I mean, if Weili wins that fight, that's pretty much would be one of the biggest upsets ever, just based on the level of skill an accomplishment of the opponent she's facing, and the fact that it's such a bad matchup.
Overall, we had a pretty good card on Saturday at UFC 248. I thought it was much better than it looked on paper. Who else stood out to you? I think Beneil Dariush looked very good. He's on a 4-fight win streak, not ranked at lightweight. That shows you just how deep that division really is. Neil Magny had to come from behind in the first round to pick up a pretty solid win, his first time back in the cage in, I think, 2 years. And then Sean O'Malley also looked good as well. He was also coming back from a suspension, getting a first-round stoppage. Who do you think could have stood out on Saturday?
I thought O'Malley did, because a lot of guys get suspended or injured or whatever the reason they're out of the sport. And what ends up happening is they decline physically, which exposes their limitations of their actual skill set. Because, they wait a year and maybe they're not as fast or they're just not as sharp. And during that downtime, you're off for 2 years. Yeah, you can't make money, but it's still the sport you want to come back to. You should be refining your craft. A lot of fighters don't. Cynthia Calvillo was off for a period of time. She didn't come back any better. She had like one new trick to her whole thing. She was the same fighter as when she got suspended, and her performances showcase that. So the thing I was looking for O'Malley, I already know he's a top-end athlete, but the fact is, in his division, there's lots of guys who are athletic. The question is, was he going to show some restraint? Was he going to show some more accuracy? Was he going to show some more poise and maturity in how he approached it? And he did. He didn't fight a name guy, but he fought an experienced, tough guy, and he made it look easy. Not just because of athleticism, but based off actual skill, improvement in skill, and improvement in his composure. I was very impressed with him. Dariush looked good, but he did what he always does. Outsmarts guys, applies pressure, physically breaks them down with disciplined, educated pressure and attacks. The problem he has isn't beating those kind of guys. It's when he has to face guys who have dynamic athleticism or dynamic power, who can lose 2 rounds in a row, land one shot, and turn the fight around. When he faces those guys, when he tends to come up short. When he faces guys on his athletic level or maybe slightly above his athletic level or not really elite, he always looks good. He always looks dominant. But when he faces the best of the best, that's when you start seeing the gap. That's where the separation appears.